So it's just, this is the. I hope we get some good input tonight.
Well, that one was sent to.
The mics are live now.
I was confused because I thought it may be your district.
I'll see what this one says.
Just real quickly before we get started, for the folks from the public, if you want to use the microphone, there is a power button on the stem of the microphone. In order for us to record the public comments, you'll need to use the microphone and you'll have to turn it on before you speak, okay? But we're going to get started in 1 minute.
Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Hope you're all well and enjoying this beautiful day. I would like to welcome you to this evening's town hall and thank you so much for giving up your Wednesday to attend it. Once every 10 years, the district maps throughout Illinois are adjusted and redrawn. And I'm sure we've read a little bit about that in the newspapers lately about the redistricting, and we have the state representative and the Illinois Senate districts have been, they've been through the reapportionment and the redrawing, and we're in the process now of doing that the same for Kane County. The Kane County Reapportionment Committee, which is comprised of a bipartisan selection of elected board members and community leaders, have already met a couple of times and will be meeting again next week. If there's any board members or elected officials here, could you just turn on your mic and just please introduce yourself?
I'm Cheryl Strathman. I represent District 20, which is Elgin, and I'm new to the board as of December.
Glad you're here.
I'm John Martin. I represent District 11, which includes parts of Geneva and Batavia.
And are we sitting in your district right now?
Where?
There we go.
Welcome.
Very good.
Dave Brown, and I represent District 10, which is the south. Well, it abuts Mr. Martin's district, so I take in part of Batavia and North Aurora, and been on the board just as long as Cheryl has been.
Is there anybody in the audience?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Burns. I'm the mayor of Geneva.
Welcome, Mr. Burns. For a little housekeeping, before we go further, as Roger mentioned, you can push the little green button, but we ask after you're done speaking, you shut the green button off, so that way you won't be recorded. So everyone just take a look and turn it on and off. Some of the microphones are better than others. So if yours doesn't work and you choose to speak, just shift the microphone around and you'll be able to get a working microphone. As you may have read in the newspapers again, the Reapportionment Committee is carefully reviewing Kane County's population growth occurring, particularly in the northern section of Kane County, as well as the growing richness of our growing minority communities. And I'd like to show you a little bit about what the maps are. This is the map that we are using, and both this map and this map are exactly the same. The difference between the two is the populations that we can see. So this map was drawn by the board that was sitting in 2011. And I'd like to call your attention to County Board 9. At that time, the population was 21,900. Currently, best estimated data is 30,013. So we've had significant growth over the 10 years of this one district. And we're going to see similar growth in portions of the county. This one, 15 was 22,270, 25,831. So it's grown by about 2,500. Nothing as significant as this one though, however, and we're forecasting that this area up here on the 90 corridor is forecasted to grow 43% by 2050. So this is going to be significant, and we have to carefully address that district as we look forward to the next 10 years because of housing growth and development. Industry, because of the 90 and the 47 interchange, finds this area to be very welcoming. And with industry comes people and the need for schools, et cetera. So this is an area we're going to be paying careful attention to as we start looking at the board. Now, this map here is the MALDEF map. It's Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. It's a proactive group that supports minority populations. And what they did in 2011 is they took a look at what our minority populations were, a snapshot of it at that time. What I like about displaying this map is you get a chance to see where the distribution is. With these maps here, you can see population, but you can't see where the minorities are and where the differences are. So the yellow is primarily Caucasian. But then you start seeing pockets here. And this is in Carpentersville, this is Elgin, and here's Aurora. Now, naturally, you expect Aurora to have a large growth of minority population. Right now, we're taking a look at data that shows that we have probably over 33% minority population here in Kane County. And we're hoping that when we start drawing these new maps, which will be the 2021 map, that is completely reflected. So we can make sure, and Zach will be talking a little bit more about this, that we pay special attention to these minority districts because of protection of the Voting Rights Act. So we're leading with this, and then we'll lead with population to make sure that these are fair maps that are equitably drawn. As part of the county's map drawing process and statutory requirements, we are required to present the map to the public for your comments and before a final vote is taken. However, your voice and concerns and concepts and ideas are vital to us at the very early process of drawing these maps, which is why we're having these town halls. Your comments, please, are welcomed and needed, and we will document them. That's why we have Karen here taking notes, taking our minutes, so that we can present this back to the task force as well as to the board, so they know exactly what your needs are and what your concerns are. But before we begin this listening session, we are going to talk a little bit more about the current maps, talk a little bit about the process of redrawing the maps because of the statutory requirements, and ask for your help in participating in a poll. I look forward, and we look forward, to hearing your thoughts and comments. And I would now like to introduce Zach Kautsky, who's going to be actually talking about the process that we have gone through to draw these maps. So Zach.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name again is Zach Kautsky, and been hired, I didn't know this moves, been hired by the county along with my colleague Josina Marita to help with your redistricting process here. So a couple things that we're going to go through first. And we're starting, yeah, all right. So the process again is now starting to look back at where the maps that were passed 10 years ago need to be tweaked. This is going to be a little different than what you've probably been hearing will be the process in the state, in that the state's population decline, about 18,000, means that we lose a congressional seat. So the district sizes, because we're losing in one entire district, are going to expand substantially in that case in the state of Illinois. Because Kane County actually grew in population, and your districts in total are remaining the same, the population within the districts from what we're looking at in 2011 to what we're now going to be ultimately passing in 2021 are not going to change all that much. It'll be about a 750 vote increase, or I'm sorry, 750 person increase per district. So just keep that in mind when we're going through this. So the 2011 maps here, not the MALDF one, but this one directly behind me was what was ultimately passed. You'll see if you were up here, if you're going to come up here later, there's some population numbers. And that's significant for a couple of purposes, and again, relates into what we're going to be doing for consideration in 2021, which is the ideal population for the 24 districts 10 years ago was around 21,500 people per district. You'll see a little sub number underneath it that says over under. And because in the state of Illinois, we don't have to redistrict down to the specific individual on that. You have a range, basically of 5% one way or another, that you're allowed or is generally accepted that you could go above that 21,500 or below that 21,500. You'll see even in 2011, the numbers are actually pretty spot on. There's not like a huge variance one way or another. That'll get into a later consideration when it comes to the Voting Rights Act and the protections therein, but you're not going to see a district that's going to have a massive population versus 5% above the 21,500 versus a district that would have 5% below 21,500. It's pretty stasis across the way. Then when looking at that, you have to determine now what the lines are going to look like going forward because of, again, the population growth. The new map itself, if we can click forward, saw population growths, and so we'll see this population consideration here. And this is in the northeast portion of the district. The coloration on the rows are indicating two different things. Yellow are majority minority. Red are the largest districts at that point. That, even then, for their estimation, were large and, we're probably needing, regardless of what population growth or decline would have been, needed to be redrawn. And then the bolded red lines are specifically indicating the districts that correlate then with that northeastern portion there. And so the northeastern portion of the county is where we've seen the most growth, along with the northern, our northern kind of more rural district as well. So we'll click forward on that. Southeast portion then, so in the Aurora area and getting into the Tri-Cities here, again, bolded, red outline are those districts specifically in the southeast portion there. But again, that same yellow majority minority and red, this large county indicate, where they were 10 years ago on that end. So if you look, if you just count up the yellow on that, you had 6 were majority minority Latino. And so when we're having to take into consideration minority populations in Kane County for the purposes of the Voting Rights Act consideration, which we'll get into, 9 times out of 10 here, that's going to likely refer to Latino residents in Kane County because they have a large enough population overall to meet certain qualifications for consideration for the Voting Rights Act. So it's not that, we break out their overall populations, Caucasian, Hispanic, Black, and other, but for the VRA and majority minority, it'll almost always be led by Latino residents in this. Even in 11 years ago, there were Latino majority districts. This is actually, you'll see District 8 there in District 6 and District 2 are not majority Latino, but with other minority populations, they would make a majority minority district for consideration on that. But that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing when, again, considering the Voting Rights Act consideration on that. But again, you can see there are some really significant concentrated populations of minority voter or minority residents in King County. All right. Now, fast forward 10 years, again, population grew here. That'll bump up the overall district size to just over 22,168 would be the ideal number for every of the 24 districts there. Again, that led with about a 15,000 person increase countywide. So, math all, susses out from there. And again, yellow indicating majority minority districts, and then red indicating the largest districts via population that, again, absolutely need to be redrawn, be brought back into congruence with that new number of 22,168 as the ideal. You'll see here, again, in the yellow, led with majority consideration for minority populations by the Latino community, but also significant other minority populations as well that pushes up those numbers. You'll see a significant change here as well compared to 10 years ago, where now you aren't having districts that are just below majority population for Latino. They're now 50% plus in significant growth for the minority population in those districts. Why we bring up the MALDEF map here is, again, to reiterate that there are civil rights organizations, and again, by the acronym here, Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, you can understand what this organization, who this organization really focuses on for their advocacy and legal representation. Drew a map in Kane County on behalf of a county board member at that time, where they thought this would meet the ultimate and maximum number of Voting Rights Act districts that could be drawn. I've said Voting Rights Act, VRA, a couple times now, so to explain what that is. Voting Rights Act is a federal law that was passed in the 60s, coming out of obviously significant racial strife and unrest, to guarantee that minorities and specifically communities of interest are able, when possible, to be drawn and considered for legislative boundaries, county, city, municipal, state, legislative, and certainly federal, to be able to have populations such that they would have a overwhelming likelihood to be able to elect a member of their community to represent them. The two considerations for our purposes when we are considering how the Voting Rights Act designated communities of interest in Kane County will be dealt with are two main numbers for population. One is 65%. For Latino VRA districts, that district would need to have 65% of its voting age population, meaning eligible citizens, 18 and above, who they don't have to be registered to vote, but could register to vote at any time that they so choose and enact their ability to cast their ballot, would have to be 65% of that voting age population. The other number that we're looking at would be for 55% for voting age population for Black residents. Why the difference, 65% to 55%? In the Latino community, not everyone is going to be a citizen, and it skews younger than the population as a whole. So therefore, you would need more residents of that district than you would with a Black community that has overwhelmingly, eligible citizens to vote at that point. So those are the two numbers that we have to keep in mind for Voting Rights Act considerations. Where and when you can draw a district of around 65%, you can go 64, 63, or 66. If you want to go above. For Latino, you should do that. The Voting Rights Act would compel you to do so, and certainly legal challenges, maybe brought in by MALDEF, would require you to do so. Same thing then for where and when you can for Black populations of 55%. Illinois takes it even one step further for state purposes, where we are not bound, but we allow for what is also called coalition districts, which is, again, some of those districts that would be neither hitting that 65 or 55% for either Latino or Black populations, but combined Latino and Black population is a majority district. You should be encouraged to take that into consideration where and when you can as well. But really, for Voting Rights Act challenges and where this really has to pass muster, the VRA really looks at just those two numbers for consideration. So we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at maps. MALDEF certainly did. They drew, I believe at that point, and Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, it was 8 or 9 districts that they thought would meet that qualification. And you'll see a lot of those district boundaries look pretty similar to what was ultimately passed, but not exactly, because the map that was ultimately passed was different in that regard. So the population, again, 24 districts, where and when you can, 65% Latino, 55% Black. Using the American Community Survey data from 2015 and 2019, which is the most recent census number, since we don't have the full 2020 census until later this fall, leads us to believe that there can be 8 VRA districts drawn with meeting that qualification of at least 65% Latino population on that. And the reason that we have to consider that first is we are required to draw those districts. And so those districts' populations obviously influence then what's left to draw for the remaining population and for the remaining districts therein. So we had to draw the VRA districts first, and then we take into consideration the remaining population and community input for those other districts on that end, for the other 16 on that. So that's where we started, and I've used this analogy. Kind of think of it as like when you throw a pebble into a pond. That first concentric circle is going to be probably your most condensed, but also strongest. And as that ripple goes out, it gets larger, and that minority population gets smaller on that. So the districts are going to get larger when they're not VRA, and they certainly will not be as heavily influenced by minority populations on that end as well. Roger, if we want to keep clicking through. So where are we in the process? This is the 4th of 5 hearings that we've had. State statute requires for public input to be brought into consideration. As the chair mentioned, there's been task force meetings, which is both elected and unelected community members that have met twice now to give their input. That's how the consideration was made, that the board will not be reducing in board seat size. It'll remain at 24, that we're comfortable in using, even prior to the state saying you absolutely can. The 2019 American Community Survey data in lieu of the 2020 census data not being fully available. And then we went out into the communities and gave opportunities like this through town hall meetings for anyone to come, and we would take testimony to bring that back to the task force and ultimately to the board for ultimate consideration, and certainly for those that are working with county staff on the drawing of the map, so that we have an understanding of what communities and individuals and residents of the county themselves want to see on that. So part of that is hearing from you. These suggested testimony is exactly that. It's suggested. You don't have to answer every single one of these bullet points when you come up here, but when you do come up and offer testimony, this is a helpful maybe guideline to follow, because that will better inform exactly who you're here testifying on behalf of and where that is, and why it has led you to join us here tonight in consideration for what the districts themselves will look like. We've got one more of these after tonight, and then we will be dealing under a new timeline, and I think the chair will be speaking to it, but the state did change the timeline by which the maps ultimately have to be passed, and ultimately changed, really allowed for the 2019 American Community Survey data to be used in lieu of 2020 census not being available until September. Should probably clarify what is American Community Survey, why is it a good stand-in for census data. The ACS is a census survey that they take place on a rolling average over years. So it's still from the Census Bureau, and is a national survey that they do, again, over years, that then they release periodically and prior to the actual official census numbers. And the reason that we felt comfortable using that, and again, the state allowed for us to do so officially this weekend, is it's certainly more up to date than 2010 census data would allow for. And historically has shown that it ends up being not even 0.5% off of what the ultimate census numbers are. On average, I believe it's 0.3% differential in what the census numbers themselves provide for. So it's a better and, just decent stand-in for that ultimate census data not being in hand yet. It's not perfect, but what we're saying is it gives us a really good indication, certainly where population growth was and who is leading that population growth, and will allow us to draw more accurate maps that I believe, if need be at some point, could be tweaked when the official numbers come out later this year. But again, likelihood might be that they don't have to, because we have a variance of population. And so long as we met that Voting Rights Act consideration, we should be in pretty good position one way or another, even considering when ultimate 2020 data comes out. So that's enough for me. Obviously, we'll be around here to answer any questions that you may have. We invite you up, and I know that we'll be walking through how to offer testimony, and just again ask that you take that into consideration when you're doing so. Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name is Franklin Ramirez, and this is the audience participation segment of our town hall. In front of you, you will see a website that you are more than welcome to type in on your smartphone if you have one. If you don't, you can do so on your computer. And if you don't, you can just get us your information however you see fit. So feel free to participate as we go along this evening. And you are more than welcome to break it out as we're chatting. What we're going to do is ask for those of you that are here in the audience tonight and would like to speak, please raise your hand. We're more than happy to call on you. Remember the button on the stem of your microphone, and then we'll do 3 minutes. For those of you on Zoom, I see Jean Pierce is demonstrating very nicely by raising your hand. If you can do so and let me know that you would like to speak, we will call on you in no particular order. And at the end, for those of you that do not know how to do that, I will open it up and please jump on in when we can. So is there anyone in the audience today that would like to offer testimony for this evening? Yes, please. When you turn on your microphone, just please state your name and then you'll go from there.
Hi, my name is Ellen Notke. I live in Batavia Township. The county has now held several public hearings on an inanimate object. Asking us to comment on the color for the walls in this room would be more productive. At least we can see it and form a valid opinion. Asking us to form an opinion or suggest changes on an invisible map is a different story. I want more representation on the board. Living in an unincorporated area of the county, my representative doesn't live in my township, sorry. In many instances in the past, present board members, excluding my current board member, didn't even know my district, their district came down to my neighborhood. You want to give pockets of citizens more representation on the board. That's admirable. However, the majority of the population you want to cater to live within 2 of the largest communities in Kane County. That population has at least 5 representatives each. The ironic part of that is that those roughly 10 board members are passing ordinances for people that don't even have to follow them because the county can't supersede a city when it comes to rules and regulations. If we are seeking to make this map fair, let's move our vision further west to the future of Kane County. I believe that these forums have been a waste of time, talent, and taxpayer money. We should be focusing on getting the maps drawn so that the public can then comment and have a rational input in the process. It makes no sense to put the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, please. You can come up to this one right now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Colstrand. I live in Geneva, and I just wanted to say that I appreciated all these hearings. It's quite a few hearings, but democracy takes work sometimes. I also appreciate the attention with which the board here is giving to minority and voting rights representation issues. That wasn't expressed very well. That's very important, and that needs to be a priority. I was struck by the fact that we're looking at 65% or 55% districts. I'm not an expert on the Voting Rights Act. I strongly support the goals of the Voting Rights Act. I was under the impression that that since the Voting Rights Act was passed, that there was a sense that in some communities, like a lower percentages could be effective in creating the diversity that the Voting Rights Act is designed to achieve. I'll give you one example, not the most obvious example here, but I know in Ohio, Joyce Beatty is a member of Congress from Columbus, and her district is 56% white. So I mean, I think that's an example where I think having lived in Columbus, her community, the Black community is a very important part of the community, influential, but not a majority. And I bring that up because I do hope, I do think there are other priorities that need to be considered, or at least should be allowed for, in addition to the Voting Rights Act, which has to be critical because it's law. And that's making sure that we have a map that reflects other types of diversity in the county, including political diversity. I would hope, and maybe this isn't, I would hope that the map we come up with, when all is said and done, that we have a map that that reflects the political diversity of our community as well. You know, there are some maps that don't, and that would be my hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience today that would like to participate? All right, moving on to Zoom, we see that Jean Pierce would like to speak. So Jean, if you would unmute yourself, and you can, if you would, for our recording secretary, please state your name and address, and then you are welcome to begin.
Yes, I'm Jean Pierce from 2333 Danbury Court in Geneva. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Central Kane County. Actually, I have a question. I'm wondering, assuming that the governor approves the election bill that was passed by both chambers this weekend, that's 825 House Amendment 1, my understanding is that December 31st is the date for county reapportionment, no longer July. So doesn't that suggest that we do not need to rely on ACS data? We can use census data.
Answer coming.
Jean, thank you very much for that question. What we're going to be doing here, since if I may use the metaphor, the cart is already on the way. So we'd like to complete the map because we are still pending signature of the governor. We are still on the previous county code statute that this map has to be completed by July 13th. So if it has not changed and we don't have a signature by July 13th, then it can be bumped to a separate reapportionment committee. So why we have the input of our community leaders and our board members, I feel it's important that we develop a provisional map, not a final map, but a provisional map that will be agreed upon. And then once we get the census data, the actual census data, we can review it, make sure that it is exactly as we hope it's going to be with appropriate data, which we hope is going to be appropriate data this time around. We're not quite sure because of the politics that was engaged with developing the census, creating the census, but as close as we can so that we can make block by block representation is accurate on that map as well. Then we'll bring it out to the public once again for public comment. To Ms. Notke's point, there'll be maybe 1 to 2 meetings that'll be taking place here for public comment so that the public can review the map in plenty of time so that that comment then can be reviewed back by the county board and the final maps will be drawn and approved. So that is our process.
Thank you. Ms. Pierce, did you want to finish any thoughts?
No, I think that answers it. I'm just sincerely hoping that the governor does indeed approve of the bill before July 13th.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else on Zoom that would like to offer testimony? Is there anyone else on Zoom that would like to offer testimony? Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself. All right, seeing none. Is there anyone else in the audience here that decided that wanted to offer some testimony? All right, I will remind you again, pollev.com/Kane County. It will be available through tomorrow afternoon. Please take a look at it. There are only 8 questions, very easy. However, if you do need help, feel free to reach out to one of us. More than happy to assist you with that. All of these answers are anonymous and will be shared with the task force in helping them to decide where to go with this. Again,
Question,
if there's,
please.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Bates, question, please.
Yes, please proceed.
If someone does not have a smartphone, which not everybody does, how can they participate in this survey? Is there a way to do that?
You can participate online via computer. And
What if you don't have a computer?
then I'm more than happy to give out my telephone number and we can have a conversation that way.
And you would fill out the form for somebody?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
But with that being said, Commissioner Bates, that telephone number is
Yep.
847
847
815
815
7861.
7861. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the next step is next steps, and then we'll have our closing remarks from Madam Chair.
Thank you, Franklin. So again, this is the 4th of 5 meetings that we'll be having. I believe the next one's up in Hampshire next week. And on the 9th, there we are, over at the Township Hall. And that would be the final one where we would gather testimony. All right. There's Kevin Joshua would request a opportunity to present or speak as well.
Hi, thank you. Sorry for the late raise. This is my first meeting, and it's really the first time I'm thinking about redistricting and like that process, how that follows. I'm sure it's a complicated issue. I was just wondering if there are any efforts currently to reach out to the community that are in Spanish. The Latino community speaks both languages, and I'm sure providing translation efforts would help provide more accurate, input. Has there been any efforts of that sort?
I'll let the chair chime in there.
Joshua, that is a fantastic question, and thank you for answering that. When we met in Aurora, we found that we had some representatives there, residents who came by who were bilingual, but no one represented that need. If you feel it's required, we can certainly provide that at our next meeting in Hampshire to locate an individual who is bilingual, who can fully do that interpretation. If you take a look at the yellow map, you can see that there is population growth, minority population growth in that area. And again, I'll restate what I said at the beginning. That is going to be our high growth area. So certainly we'd love to hear from them. There was representation in Aurora. The individuals were, again, bilingual, so they spoke in English about speaking of the need not only for representation of the Black community, but also the minority community. So we're fully aware of that, but if there's other critical needs that need to be represented, we look forward to hearing those voices, and we can do that up in Hampshire. But thank you, great question.
Kevin, if you're trying to still talk here, it looks like it's your feed's pretty broken up. We can't understand.
Oh, hi. Okay. So yeah, thank you to seeing the translation services, because not only is that physical barrier there, but it's a lot emotional too. Politics is very emotional, and people would feel welcomed if you are embracing people with open arms. So that would be great. And if there is any need to help even spread that word of that there will be a translation service, that I could surely help with that as well. So I could drop my contact info in the chat as well, and we could follow up.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for involving yourself tonight and offering that up. All right. I neglected to mention as well, when we're also taking into consideration not only obviously Voting Rights Act and just overall district level apportionment of population, there are some other considerations that go into this process. Not only is that typically considered the historical boundaries that the map itself here is typically offered communities for representation. We can also, if you're looking at the maps again, you'll see little sticker dots on there. Those are the incumbent addresses, approximation on the map here. But we can take into consideration incumbent addresses as well, so that we're not, wantingly or willingly drawing multiple incumbents together to then create an open district. We can also take into consideration if folks are stepping down, retiring, resigning, and offering not to run again, what would be then an open seat in that regard as well. And then also an additional consideration are other political boundaries, most notably precincts. State statute really is pretty clear that it's not encouraged at all to split precincts. And beyond that, we can look at overall municipal boundaries. I don't think we would probably take into consideration school board or, water abatement district or mosquito abatement or anything like that, but really municipal boundaries, so that you're not, taking a smaller community and, splitting it in half. Obviously, population dictates the larger cities, Elgin, Aurora, Batavia, Geneva, their population to be maintained wholly within one district is far too large. So therefore, that district, those municipal boundaries need to be, represented by multiple districts for the county's purposes. But for smaller ones, trying to maintain that integrity of that local community of interest there, is also top of mind on that. So those are some other considerations that, when we start drawing the lines here, VRA first and foremost, and then the other purposes certainly informed by the public testimony that has been offered throughout the county, and still to go with one more opportunity in Hampshire next week. So that is next steps. We will then be dealing under, and I believe the chair will be speaking to this, under new timelines that, again, if signed into law by the governor, do push out the overall dates by which passage needs to take place. And certainly we'll do so with the primary as well. You'll be looking, rather than a March 22 primary, a late June of 22 primary here as well. So it'll be a little warmer for the primary purposes, but not so much warm when you're having to pass petitions in January. So that's it for me. Thank you again for your participation and involvement tonight, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Can I have the next slide, please? The new slides. Yes, please. So this is recent. I think, 2 days. And the bill itself is 165 pages long. I will have some little light reading to do over this upcoming weekend, along with some other bills that I want to take a look at. As we're starting to review what the impact of this is for our particular county, I'd like to just step back for a little bit. The process is collecting data, obviously from a census or the American Community Survey data, and that's our next step to draw the maps. We've done that. We've got American Community Survey data that we are working with. We're going to be getting the census data mid-August, not consumable to the public because it's not readable to the public yet because it's still data. We're going to be processing through the appropriate portals and how to organize that. Then we're going to give it to our demographers who are going to be taking a look at the map that we're going to be presenting to the board on July 13th and developing that. After all that is done, for all of you who may be precinct committee people who have had a precinct committee person knock on your door, we then draw the precincts. And precincts are all over here. And those precincts will be done before the end of the year after the drawing of the final map. During this period of time, the reapportionment has been done, which means the size of the board. The board can be anywhere from 5 people to 29 people. The county board, with the advice of the task force, had kept it at 24. So we will remain the 24 districts. However, these districts are going to look a little different because we've had 10 years worth of growth. We've had 10 years where minority growth has also occurred. Minority growth has also shifted. So we want to make sure that we fully represented in terms like packing a district so that we don't have almost 90% of one district being minority, where the district adjacent to it is hovering at about maybe 60, to make sure that those district blocks are truly, truly equitable to give our minority population opportunity, not necessarily that they would vote for that individual or have that individual represent them, but the opportunity to have somebody who looks like them represent them if appropriate. But that does not necessarily mean that a candidate who is Caucasian, a candidate who is African American, a candidate who is Indian, candidate who's Asian, cannot effectively represent that district. That's what the voting is about, and that's why we have good choice. But we do have to obey the Voting Rights Act. So what is that going to look like as we start looking at the maps? Some of these are going to be going west. Now, we've also heard through our town halls that there seems to be an underrepresentation in the western part of Kane County. This is something that we have heard, we've recognized, we heard again today. So we're going to address and take a look at that and how that may make effective change to make sure that our farmlands and our rural communities are protected and represented in a little bit better equity than they are now, even though I have to admit that our county board is very supportive of rural communities, very, very supportive so far, but they want to feel that they have a more say here. So we're going to be pushing a lot of it west, and it's going to go south, is going to go a little bit further north, and the north is going to go a little bit further west and potentially south. But we'll see those maps when the reapportionment committee presents it, and there'll be 3 maps at that point. There'll be 3 drafts. It is a public meeting. You are welcome to attend. Please, I ask you to attend, and that way you have a little feedback at that point. Talk to your county board member and let them know what your thoughts are and your concerns are so that they could, again, hear your voice. So it's a completely open process. When I was first presented with this wonderful opportunity to draw maps, which is every 10 years, it's a rare opportunity, I was suggested that things are not going to change very much, that the maps will stay pretty much the same. But then as data started coming through, I realized, and I think we all realized, that it does need to be adjusted. We've grown, and we have to adjust our maps to be able to fit the new growth and the new reality of Kane County. So far, we've got Senate Bill 825, which has totally changed the landscape and the deadlines for what has to happen. The new deadline, instead of July 13th, but we're still going to do that provisional map, not the final map. The provisional map is going to be passed by consensus of the board. So just by consensus. But the new deadline for the chairman to present the apportionment plan to the county board is now November 17th, right before Thanksgiving. Then the new deadline for the county board to complete it is by December 31st, which means we'll have the precincts all drawn at that time as well. We have to have the precincts drawn so that the clerk knows who the precinct representatives are going to be. And we also have to make sure that our new elected, or the candidates are going out there, know what doors to knock, what regions that they're knocking, what are the street addresses and where the voters live. And that is all part of this process. In January, could we have the next slide? I think it's January 15th. The candidates will be out knocking on your doors. The board candidates don't need a lot of signatures, perhaps 25 to 35 signatures. They may want to knock more doors so they get a chance to meet more people, which is always wise. But look at them kindly as they go out into blizzards and into cold weather, as they're knocking on your door, begging you for a signature at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the snow is blowing and the sun is going down. Think kindly on them, please. So here's our next 5 town halls. And as you can see, the next one is going to be at Hampshire Township. We chose Hampshire because once again, it is on the northwestern part of our county. We want to make sure, which is going to be a potential high growth area for the next 10 years. And we want to ensure that their voices are heard. Even though that this is an open form of government, the county is large. And it's hard for people sometimes to travel an hour to get from one point to another to attend these meetings. So believing in open form of government, that democracy does take time, we bring government to you. But when we start doing the regular maps, we'd love to have you here. You can participate via Zoom. You can listen in, certainly read the papers, take a look at the minutes, and be engaged. Because your representation, your future representation is going to be very important for you. Make sure that cities are not cut up, that your precincts are represented, and that you have equity, true equity here, not Democrat, not Republican, but true equity in your maps. So that's what our hopes and our goals for. And if there's any other questions, if not, we're a little bit early. If you think of anything later on, please, you have Franklin's phone number. You certainly can contact me, contact the board, your representative, and they would be delighted to talk to you, and I know that for a fact. So thanks all for coming, and have a great evening and enjoy the rest of the sunset.